Chapter 14. Time. June 28th, 1998. Raccoon City. Alright, I understand. Lawrence took the receiver away from his ear and set it back in its cradle with the gentle care one would give high explosives. I understand? Who am I kidding? I have no clue what to do. Henry Sarton is dead, Albert Wesker is out of state, and I'm being eaten from the inside out. As if on cue, his stomach knotted tighter as an incremental pain began its slow burn, smoldering in his intestines and eating its way up into his esophagus. He rocked forward in his chair and clamped his eyes shut. Across the room, an electric clock buzzed as if it were attempting some sort of rudimentary communication. The gnawing in his gut worsened. He doubled over, running both hands through his nest of uncombed hair. His chest tightened as if he was being zipped into a straitjacket. He could taste bile again. His breath was coming in tiny gasps. Panicking only makes the pain worse. I need to calm down. Calm down? It sounded like an easy thing to do. A few squeezes of a stress ball, a brisk walk outside. Simple, right? Sure, with his mind wholly occupied with the mansion, overrun with infected umbrella staff, and the acid leaking from a hole in his stomach, calming down was about as simple as breathing underwater. He wiped at his face and fumbled for the bottle, stowed away in the bottom drawer of his desk. Grabbing it like a priest would a crucifix, he poured himself a generous shot into his coffee cup, steeled himself, and downed the contents, wincing as it sluiced its way down his scorched digestive tract. He watched, nauseated, as the dregs swished in a pink ring at the bottom of his mug. Everything about Pepto-Bismol was unpleasant. The pastel color, the vaguely soapy taste, the chalky texture. The stuff barely worked against stomach ulcers anyway. Was it the placebo effect he was hoping for, or was it some sort of latent masochism that kept him from buying caseloads of that Barbie pink snake oil? He bent forward again while the clock continued its mechanical nagging. Buzz, tick. It is now 2:50 in the morning. Buzz, tick. You are wasting time. The dragon in his belly raged against its prison walls. His stomach felt like a bowl of molten slag. He hugged his legs, praying that the Pepto-Bismol would deliver him from at least one of his afflictions. 67 staff, possibly all infected, plus the test subjects, plus the bioorganic weapons, plus secondary and tertiary infections. His cheeks chafed against the rough corduroy at his knees. He grit his teeth as the agony in his midsection nullified all thoughts not related to the cessation of pain. Given the circumstances, this might have been an improvement. Gradually, the feeling of evisceration dulled to a light tugging of the bowels. He wheeled himself closer to his desk, slumped forward, and attempted to ignore Edgar Allan Poe's telltale clock. Buzz, tick. It is now 2:03. He covered his ears and groaned through clenched teeth. A film of Pepto-Bismol slicked along his molars. Buzz, tick. There is a viral outbreak at the Spencer estate. Without giving a second moment's thought, he was blundering to his feet. He needed to get out of this office, away from the hateful electric reminder of Umbrella's failure. He stumbled ahead, swallowing back acidic paste, claggy at the back of his throat. A neat pile of Xeroxed memos scattered to the floor as he made his retreat. Out in the hallway, drowsy faces, featureless walls, electric clocks. He doubled his pace, scrambling down a flight of stairs. He needed air, There was nothing but dust to breathe in these hallways. It was impossible to think under the X-ray glow of the fluorescent light. On the main floor now, he could feel acid creeping into his mouth. The dragon was on full rampage. He stumbled ahead, bumped past a janitor, muttered an apology. It took strength nearly beyond him to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Dust, electric clocks, fluorescent lights. He wanted to drop to the floor and ball up. Instead, he brushed past the security desk, nodding to the guard. He was 20 feet from the doors. He had to restrain himself from sprinting. He worried that if he allowed himself to run, he would find himself behind the wheel of his roadmaster, speeding towards city limits. He worried that if he started running, he would never stop. Almost there, 5 feet, 3 feet. A quick push and he was through the doors, careening towards the deserted smoker's bench. Free from the suffocating confines of White Umbrella Raccoon City headquarters, he allowed himself a full breath of air, taking in the stench of the industrial park, metallic rainwater, hot brakes, burnt paint. So many Umbrella staff complained of the acidic reek. Ordinarily, he wasn't fond of the smell either, but tonight he took comfort in it. He had been breathing in the tainted northern Raccoon City air for 52 years, first as a boy growing up in the Millhaven district, later as Umbrella Chemicals production manager, and now as White Umbrella's Raccoon City program coordinator. Perhaps tonight he needed the reassurance that some things remained as they were so many years ago. He sat on top of the picnic table and took another deep breath. His eyes climbed along the Umbrella Chemicals shipping warehouse. They slipped past a helicopter, parked askew on the elevated helipad, and crawled up the chipped white generator smokestacks. At last, they settled on the rugged horizon, a fuzzy black blanket of trees, barely visible in the gentle rain. If one were to follow his line of sight, over Firewatch Hill, past the Dixon Quarries, through the Westridge Tailings Fields, they would eventually find themselves at Umbrella's mansion. Although, he supposed that Umbrella could no longer claim ownership of the Spencer estate. It seemed that sometime in the past 2 weeks, the T-Virus had claimed the mansion as its own. He often compared the viral research White Umbrella conducted to the Manhattan Project. Both projects were horrifically dangerous and dedicated to the destruction of human life, terrifying examples of the scientific process. The Manhattan Project had ushered in a new era of warfare. Bioweaponry was bound to do the same. He also believed that just as clean energy and radiation therapy had followed the atomic bomb, so would medicinal applications follow the bioweaponry Umbrella was developing. A more cynical man would have said that self-deception was a wonderful thing, but truth be told, Lawrence Jenkins did not need self-deception. He was aware that the things his organization did were wrong, that Umbrella was using human test subjects and violating every scientific ethic conceivable. He had told himself, more than once, that just as Robert Oppenheimer and Edward Teller had left legacies to be judged by society, so would he and the rest of White Umbrella. It seemed that viral research had nuclear science bested in one respect. It had taken nuclear science nearly 40 years to suffer its first major catastrophe. Viral research had shaved a decade off that record. Nuclear research had its Chernobyl. Viral research had its Raccoon City. He wiped at his face and tried not to imagine the infected URC Annex researchers stumbling across Sherritt's Bridge, fanning out into the cider district, spreading their disease. Naturally, the BOWs would follow the infected staff. The MA-121 Hunter was ideal for semi-aquatic terrain. It would adapt very well to Raccoon City's sewers. Umbrella had learned the hard way that the ME-121 found human beings to be an excellent food source. If they followed the Arklay River, they would quickly find ample food, even with their incredible metabolisms. Why had it taken a low-rent helicopter pilot to be their canary in the mineshaft? The Arklay Research Facility Director had missed 3 consecutive SAT phone calls. Locals had been turning up dead within a few miles of the mansion. Had they been so blinded by their hubris that they had believed a massive outbreak was impossible? If so, then why had Umbrella planned so many elaborate contingency plans to deal with this very fear? More important, why is the man in charge of implementing those plans doing nothing? It made no sense. There should be squadrons of helicopters roaring overhead. His 2-story office should be thrumming with activity. White Umbrella's Army for Hire, the UBCS, should be mobilized and headed toward the hot zone with every weapon available. Why was Albert Wesker stalling their deployment? "Mr. Jenkins," a familiar voice called. He raised his head, gave a slow wave, but did not rise. The beast in his stomach had bedded down, and he was unwilling to rouse it from its uneasy slumber. "Over here," he said. A series of hasty footsteps followed his reply. Soon, Annette Birkin was standing in front of him, tapping one foot. He gazed at her and rubbed his eyes. It had taken him 6 minutes to get dressed and into his car. With her hair matted and rumpled dress slacks, Mrs. Birkin seemed to have shaved a few minutes off his mark. "You didn't answer your beeper." Her voice had an unfamiliar strident pitch, but it held as steady as a surgeon's hands. She was an ideal choice for the Underground Research Center facility director. "I left it on my nightstand. Have a seat." He gestured at the picnic table's wooden top. "Did you call Wesker?" He nodded and shuffled over as she sat down. "What did he say?" she asked. He was helpless to restrain the laughter that escaped him, though it was more of a high-pitched whistle than a laugh, likely triggered by the instinctual fight-or-flight section of his brain. "He told me to do nothing," he said. The dragon flicked its tail and stretched. "What?" The table creaked as she shifted to face him. "He told me to do nothing. He figures that he'll be back from Montana in a few days. He told me that he'll take care of things when he returns." She shook her head. Her eyes were puffy to the point of looking chemical burnt. Under the jaundiced glow of the building's arc sodium lights, she had the waxy pallor of a medical cadaver. "That makes no sense." Her foot drummed on the picnic table's leg. "He must have given you some sort of instructions." "Well, yes, if you could call them instructions." Another nervous laugh. "He wants me to call the RPD Chief of Police. Apparently he's on Umbrella payroll. I am to tell him to hold off in any investigation into the murders around the Arklay facility, and to keep Stars Bravo off the case. Tomorrow the RPD will issue a press statement, informing the townspeople to stay out of the woods due to unusual animal attacks. Once Wesker gets back, he'll lead both Stars teams in, retrieve the project data, and set the facility self-destruct. It's a stupid plan. He has no idea how long the standoff in Montana will take to wrap up. That one in Waco lasted nearly 2 months. The virus would be in Raccoon City by then. Annette tapped her foot. The steady padding of rubber on wood had begun to sound quite a bit like the buzz and tick of an electric clock. His gut twisted around itself, and he ground his teeth. "Will that work?" she asked. "I don't know. I'm thinking of calling Vladimir." Annette chewed on his words for a moment before replying. "I wouldn't do that," she said. "Wesker is the security director. It's his call to make." "No, it's not." He fished out a wrinkled memo from his back pocket and read it aloud. "White Umbrella, Facility Breach Directive, Revision 43, 12/22/91. In case Regional Security Director is unable to carry out Level 1 containment measures, Adjutant is to contact White Umbrella Security Director Sergei Vladimir. Containment orders will be issued. I've read the security protocols. Tap, tap, went her foot. Then you know what I'm supposed to be doing, he said. Yes, I know, but there could be a matter of interpretation in those instructions. Tap, tap. The directive states that Vladimir is to be contacted if the regional security director is unable to carry out his duties. It seems that Wesker believes that he can contain this, discreetly. So you think I should sit on my hands? He asked. It's not my decision, but yes. Wesker is no fool. He knows the T-virus's infectivity better than most, and he's not one to take unnecessary risks. He couldn't disagree with that statement. Albert Wesker, Raccoon City Security Director, seemed more machine than man, extremely competent, free of any sentimentality. With his dark clothes and black sunglasses, he looked like that killer robot, the Terminator. Anyway, I came up here to tell you that we ran some coaches on the blood that pilot brought back on him. The Arclay facility staff are infected with T. Basil. He breathed a sigh of relief. It was the first bit of good news he had heard all night. T. Basil was one of the less contagious strains of the T-virus, primarily used on reptilian bioweapons. It was slow to spread, difficult to transmit among mammals. That's a relief. How's our canary doing? He asked. Who? The pilot. Oh, him. He's frightened, angry, she said. Infected? No. He seems clean. Lucky guy, I suppose. Did he tell you if he saw any BOWs loose? He asked. No. All he saw was infected staff. That's good. You could say that. She pushed herself off the table. Her restless foot splashed in a shallow puddle. I need to get back downstairs. William wants to go over those coaches. Lawrence paused to wonder how the head virologist, William Birkin, the notorious obsessive-compulsive, was taking this news. Given his prima donna personality, probably not very well. Let me know if you find anything else, he said at last. Of course. She gave him a brief pat on the shoulder and then turned away. Her lab coat billowed out as she hurried back to her underground kingdom. He bent forward and massaged his temples. Those victims in the woods were not the Eastern European death row inmates Umbrella had used as test subjects. They were not the research staff who knew the dangers of their work and were paid handsomely for it. He had known the outbreak boys' parents, Gary and Linda. They had been the photographers at Julie's wedding. Benjamin Connor was a local realtor who had ads all through town. Lawrence got to his feet. The outbreak needed to be contained immediately, Wesker be damned. The people dying in those woods were his neighbors and co-workers. He would not allow the entire city to be sacrificed to suppress Umbrella's dirty secrets. He had made it up the stairs when the dragon stirred once again, and his nerve began to falter. If he alerted Vladimir, there would be no way that Umbrella could conceal the presence of their mercenary army. Even if the outbreak was contained, all work done at Raccoon City would be halted and relocated to a more secure location. Albert Wesker and Annette Birkin, by proxy of her genius husband, were near gods in the Umbrella hierarchy, while he was a local, a facilitator. The best case scenario would likely involve Umbrella dumping him as a failure. The worst case scenario would likely involve the company dumping his body down a deep hole. Albert Wesker had told him to stall for time, and he would be ignoring one of Wesker's direct orders if he called Vladimir. Of course, the White Umbrella security directives had been penned at Sergei Vladimir's desk. Sergei Vladimir was not a man to be disobeyed. Lawrence swallowed back another mouthful of acid as he envisioned the giant, one-eyed Russian looming over his desk. Vladimir, with his grey buzz cut, his grey suit, his grey teeth. He could already hear his accented English. He could see the mirror flash of metal, could feel the razor hone of Vladimir's cherished NR-40 combat knife slice into his belly, deflating his lungs and spilling his guts to the floor. It was no longer a question of what was right. It was a question of who he feared more, Wesker, the machine, or Sergei, the bear. He stepped into his office, skidded a guest chair along the tiles, using it as a stool to unplug that despicable clock. The time in this room would read 3:46 until the crisis was over, or he was in his grave. With a heavy sigh, he dropped into his chair, fished out the bottle of Pepto-Bismol, and drained it in one gulp. The bear or the Terminator. Pick your poison. He ran a raw tongue along his teeth and picked up the phone. The receiver felt like a gun at his temple. He dialed a local number and pulled the trigger.